Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, The Financial Impact of Gray Divorce and Repartnering Later in Life. It is noon, so it is time to get going. So an important note, today's webinar is being recorded, and the slides, as well as the recording, will be available within a few business days on the Retirement and Disability Research Center website. Um, so it'll be available then. My name is Jonathan Ferguson. I'm a financial capability specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Retirement and Disability Research Center, which is the center that's organized today's webinar. On the screen, you'll see our agenda for the day. So we have the welcome and introduction, which we're doing now. Shortly, we'll move into our presentations by our researchers, and then we also have a policy and practice perspective. If time allows, we will have a Q&A towards the end of the webinar, and then also we'll sign off. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box of Zoom. We will gather those questions and address them during the Q&A session, or we'll answer them in real time, one of or the other. If we don't get to your question, we certainly will do our best to get an answer to you after the webinar, as we do have record of all the questions that are submitted. All right, so today we have our great presentation team. Our researchers are both professors of sociology at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And then we also have Judith Kozlowski from the Women's Institute for Secure Retirement. All of these folks have great achievements, but in the interest of time, considering how much we have to get through today, we're going to forego formal verbal introductions. I'll drop some things in the chat for you to see and just jump right into it. So I will invite Dr. Brown on and turn things over to her for the research presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan, and good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to share our research on gray divorce and repartnering with you today. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors on this paper, including my colleague I-Fen Lin, who will deliver the second half of this talk, and Chris Julian, who's a graduate student in our program and a co-author on the paper. And of course, let me also acknowledge the support that we've received from Wisconsin's RDRC and the Social Security Administration, and note that the opinions and conclusions that we're sharing are ours alone and do not represent either the RDRC or the Social Security Administration. So the divorce rate in the United States has actually been slowly declining for the past 4 decades, something that comes as a surprise to many Americans who believe that divorce is always increasing in the US, but in fact, the overall rate is slowly ebbing downward. But this trend belies growing divergence in divorce rates by age. So divorce rates are plummeting among young adults, even as they've been accelerating among middle-aged and older adults. In our own work, we found that between 1990 and 2010, the gray divorce rate, which describes divorces to adults age 50 and older, doubled. Since then, the rate has largely stabilized. Now, despite the overall stability of the gray divorce rate in recent years, we can see on this slide that gray divorces are constituting a growing share of all divorces that take place in the United States. Up until 1990, less than 10% of people getting divorced were age 50 and beyond. So it might have been fair back then to say older people don't get divorced. But you can see here that by 2010, the share had jumped to more than 1 in 4 people divorcing were over the age of 50. And as of 2019, we find that more than 1 in 3, 36% of people getting divorced were at least age 50. And something that's not shown here on the slide, but I think is important to note, is that 1 in 10 Americans who are divorcing these days are actually 65 years old or beyond. And we can explain this shifting age composition as reflecting of several interrelated demographic factors, including not only the doubling of the gray divorce rate, but also the falling rate of divorce that we're observing among younger people that I mentioned a minute ago, and the aging of the married population as young people continue to delay entry into marriage. So gray divorce is experienced by more than 700,000 Americans each year, and it has notable consequences for their well-being. We know that divorce undermines economic well-being in general, and what we're finding in our research and other studies is that the detrimental effects of getting divorced are especially pronounced for older adults. So following gray divorce, the standard of living for women falls by about 45%, whereas for men, it falls for about 21%. These figures reflect more than double the level of decline as compared to what we see for younger people. We also know that older adults getting divorced are having to split their nest eggs, and wealth declines by about half for both men and women after a gray divorce. And what we found in our work is that these economic consequences tend to persist over time. There doesn't seem to really be much recovery, at least in the short to medium term. We might view something like repartnering as a path to economic recovery, to pool your assets with a new partner or spouse, but we find that this benefit only obtains among women and not men. But it's important to point out that the vast majority of women don't go on to repartner after a gray divorce, and the few that do tend to be among the most advantaged financially to begin with. So we wouldn't want to say that repartnering is a panacea. I think that consequently, then, it's not surprising that other research is showing sizable levels of poverty post-gray divorce, even among adults who are age eligible for and actually receiving Social Security benefits. So, for example, more than 1/4 of gray divorced women and about 13% of gray divorced men who are at least age 63 are living in poverty. And this is with Social Security benefits. In fact, more broadly, when we think about the role that Social Security could play in gray divorce, we believe that Social Security beneficiary status may shape decisions about whether and when to seek a divorce. So we know from prior work that divorce decisions tend to be sensitive to the Social Security Administration's 10-year marriage rule for eligibility for spousal benefits, because divorces at 11 and 12 years, right after that cut point, at 11 and 12 years duration of marriage tend to be higher than we would expect. And we see this pattern as signaling that marriage and divorce behaviors are perhaps responsive to a consideration of the relative costs and benefits that determine the overall utility of divorce. And so what we're doing in this study is extending this cost-benefit framework to see if it holds for decisions about whether and when to repartner after a gray divorce. So repartnering could be a strategy for some older adults to enhance their economic well-being. We know in general, repartnering tends to be more common among those who are more financially secure, as indicated by their levels of education or their wealth. And our study is going to ask, what is the role of Social Security benefits in repartnering after gray divorce? Now, older adults don't just remarry. Increasingly, they form cohabiting unions instead. And in fact, gray divorce is more often followed by cohabitation than by remarriage. And the role of Social Security benefits in decisions to form cohabiting versus marital unions in the second half of life remain a bit opaque. They're still unclear. Scholars have argued that cohabitation serves as a viable alternative to remarriage in later life, largely because it allows partners to retain their economic autonomy, ensuring that they continue to receive benefits such as Social Security and pensions that accrue from an ex-spouse, and that they can preserve their nest egg for themselves and their offspring. In contrast, remarriage could mean relinquishing Social Security benefits from an ex-spouse, which could make remarriage less attractive, especially when compared to cohabitation. However, we do know that for more recent cohorts of older women, including baby boomers, they're often divorcing without having had a 10-year marriage that could provide them with spousal benefits. And for earlier generations, by comparison, more than 3/4 of women would have qualified for such benefits. So in our study, we draw on prospective data from the Health and Retirement Study dataset to decipher how Social Security beneficiary status is related to repartnering following gray divorce. And what we do is we treat cohabitation and remarriage as competing risks, with our tacit assumption being older adults are choosing between these two types of partnerships. And then secondarily, for those who do repartner, we can compare the risks of forming a cohabiting versus a marital union. So I want to pause for just a minute and talk about how we can measure Social Security beneficiary status in the HRS dataset, because it informs how we construct our hypotheses. We went into this study with perhaps some grand ideas about how we could develop fine-grained measures, but then when the rubber hits the road and we confront reality here, we had to simplify a bit. So I'm just going to describe this here because it then segues into how we think about our hypotheses. So in every wave of the HRS, which, the HRS is interviewing people every 2 years, the respondents are asked to report on their Social Security receipt status. So we don't necessarily know the source of the benefit, though, if they tell us they're receiving Social Security. And if a respondent isn't currently receiving benefits, they are asked to tell us whether they expect to receive those benefits based on either their own work history, their spouse's work history, or both work histories. So we can take these survey items and construct a 3-category measure of Social Security beneficiary status, as you can see on the screen. The first group of people are those who are currently receiving Social Security retirement benefits. The second group are those who are expecting to receive benefits sometime in the future, but they're not currently receiving. And then lastly, we have the very small group that neither expect to receive benefits nor are currently receiving such benefits. So let's turn here to our hypotheses that are guiding our study. We have 3 hypotheses that we're going to test. So first, we're expecting that those who receive Social Security benefits are going to be least likely to remarry, followed by those who expect to receive benefits in the future, since, as I stated a minute ago, remarriage could mean that individuals have to relinquish their benefits. The second hypothesis is that Social Security beneficiary status will be unrelated to cohabitation, since we know that an informal partnership like cohabitation is not going to alter one's eligibility status for Social Security. And lastly, we hypothesize that for those who repartner, receipt of Social Security, and to a lesser extent expecting to receive such benefits in the future, will be negatively related to remarriage versus cohabitation. All right, now I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleague I-Fen Lin, who will tell you more about the specifics of our study, what we found, and the ramifications of our work.
Thank you, Susan. In the following, I will introduce the data and present the finding from our study. So we took the data from 1998 to 2018 Health and Retirement Study. And this is a nationally representative study of non-institutionalized adults over age 50. As Susan mentioned earlier, the respondents were re-interviewed every 2 years. And the HRS also adds refresher samples every 6 years to ensure the sample continue to be representative of the older population, meaning the age 50 and above. The HRS is an ideal data set for our study because they track respondent prospectively. So HRS include information about respondents' social security status and the current marital status at every wave. And we also have information about marital dissolution since last interview and the year of divorce. One unique feature of the HRS is that we are able to separate marital separation from divorce. So we are able to know when the couple separated and when their divorce is finalized. And in this data set, we were able to identify over 1,000 respondents who experienced marital separation. Of these respondents, 561 respondents reported obtaining a divorce and provided a year when the divorce occurred. And our final sample is smaller than original 1,115 because there are several separation pathways. As shown in this figure, once a couple separate, they could get a divorce, remain separated for several years, and didn't get a divorce, become widowed, and reconcile with their spouse, or they live with a new partner. So here we focus on 561 respondents whose separation ended in divorce, and they provided the year of their divorce in a health and retirement study. As Susan mentioned, at every wave, we measure Social Security status in 3 categories: receiving benefits, expected to receive benefits in the future, but not currently receiving, and neither expecting nor receiving benefit. The bar chart on the right shows the distribution of repartnering by Social Security status at baseline. The color gray represents the percentage of respondents who remarried. Green denotes the percentage who cohabited, and yellow indicates the percentage who remain unpartnered. The percentage sum to 100% for each bar. As you can see from this graph, the respondents who received Social Security were the least likely to remarry at 8%. In comparison, 15% of those who expected to receive Social Security and 22% of those who neither received nor expected to receive Social Security had remarried. When it came to cohabitation, 25% of respondents who expected to receive Social Security choose to cohabit, compared to 20% of those who received Social Security and 9% for those who neither received nor expected to receive Social Security. So this bivariate results suggest that there is association between Social Security status and repartnering. However, there may be other factors may confound these associations. Therefore, in a multivariable analysis, we control the following potential confounding characteristic, including economic resources such as employment, wealth, pension, also physical health, social ties, and marital biography, such as years since divorce, and marriage of 10 years or more. We also controlled for demographic characteristics such as age, race, and sex. And as you can see, most of these covariates are time-varying variables, meaning that we were able to measure this characteristic at every wave. So in the following, we will present two sets of results. The first, we will estimate cumulative probabilities to examine the competing risk of repartnering through remarriage or cohabitation within 10 years following gray divorce. And the second set of results, we will estimate, we show the result when we estimated discrete time event history model using multinomial logistic regression to predict the competing risk of cohabitation versus remarriage. So this modeling strategy can help us to handle left censoring bias, that is to control for time since divorce. Also, this analysis strategy allows us to include time varying variables. As I showed in the previous slide, we have a lot of characteristics that vary over time. Finally, our missing data were minima. So we perform multi-imputation to handle missing data. So here shows the cumulative probabilities of repartnering after great divorce within 10 years, the 10 years after great divorce. The dashed line represents cohabitation. The solid line indicates remarriage. So this line shows that this graph shows that repartnering occurred more often through cohabitation than through remarriage. This table shows the relative risk ratio from the multinomial logistic regression, predicting the likelihood of forming either a remarriage or cohabitation following great divorce versus remaining unpartnered. And we treat remarriage and cohabitation as competing risk. So as you can see from this table, we showed the number for two key predictors. And then we just use the positive and negative sign to show the association, the positive association or negative association between other covariates and our dependent variable. So number greater than 1 indicate more likely. Number less than 1 indicate less likely. The star next to the number indicate they are statistically different from 0. There are statistical significant association. Now let's look at the first row. So receiving Social Security was related to a lower risk of forming a marriage relative to staying single, as indicated by 0.25. That is relative risk ratio. And then the Social Security beneficiary status was unrelated to the risk of forming a cohabiting union. And this is net of other variable in the model. And then among those who are repartnered, receiving Social Security was positively associated with entry into cohabitation versus remarriage. In the second row, we can see that the individual expected to receive benefit were more likely to choose cohabitation rather than remarriage, as indicated by 8.73 as a relative risk ratio. We also identify other factors significantly associated with repartnered, but due to time constraints, I won't delve into those details here. But in general, to our surprise, several economic resources such as wealth and pension were not particularly predictive of repartner in this sample. So to sum up, our first hypothesis was partially supported. We find that receiving Social Security benefit was negatively associated with entry into remarriage, but expecting to receive benefit has no significant association with remarriage. For our second hypothesis is also supported. That is, Social Security beneficiary status was unrelated to the risk of forming a cohabiting union. Finally, our third hypothesis is supported. That is, among older adults who repartnered, both receiving Social Security and expected to receive it were positively associated with choosing cohabitation over remarriage. So to echo to what Susan mentioned earlier about cost and benefit framework, our study demonstrates that receipt of Social Security deter repartner through cohabitation, yet it has no appreciable effect on repartner through cohabitation. And we find that economic resources are not particularly predictive of repartnering. And also we find that older adults more often enter cohabitation than remarriage after a great divorce, suggests that cohabitation is gaining ground. So the next important step will be to investigate the impact of repartner on Social Security beneficiary and receipt. This is the end of my presentation. Now I would like to turn my slide to Judith.
Here we go. Well, hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm adding a very different voice to all of the work that has been done by Susan and I-Fen to look at the practical implications of gray divorce and looking at the financial impact, particularly for women, and the questions of divorce and repartnering in later life. I'm representing here today the Women's Institute for Secure Retirement, or it's known as WISER. We in Washington, D.C. always joke that we have the best acronym of anybody because we all want to be wiser women. So let me tell you a little bit about WISER. WISER is the only nonprofit in the United States that really looks specifically at women's financial life. It provides women with basic tools and financial information aimed at helping them take control of their financial lives, and includes some of these topics, including Social Security, saving and investing, caregiving, retirement planning, widowhood, divorce, health and long-term care, and financial fraud and abuse. WISER operates in as part of the Administration of Community Living at HHS, the National Resource Center for Women and Retirement Planning. It's been around for about 26 years. So we start to look at why women, because of their unique challenges. And I think this is also borne out, although not as directly in some of the work that you've just heard about. Women earn less over time. They take time away from their work, or they're working part-time. As a result, they have less in savings and retirement. Also, women tend to live longer than men and often live alone in retirement. I'm now echoing some of what you heard from Susan earlier, that one study has found that women who divorce after 50 experience a 45% decline in their standard of living, while men see theirs drop by 21%. So the drop for women is substantial, almost by half, and changes a lot of the decision-making that goes into life after that great divorce. Around 20% of women, however, become impoverished in the year following a divorce, according to the Census Bureau, while that only occurs for 11% of men. Again, that would, I think, result in the several factors I just articulated about in and out of the workforce, and certainly lower wages while in the workforce. So what are some of the things that need to be considered, or considering looking at a gray divorce? Some of the most important information to look for is what are all the sources of income? What post-divorce, what is the financial life going to look like? Are you going to be able to have any lump sum payments for investment or other sources that can become regular sources of income? Are there other divorce assets such as real estate or retirement assets or accounts? Is there a quadro distribution, a retirement order that comes with your divorce to be able to determine whether or not you will have any distributions from your partner's retirement plan? And also looking at whatever other asset streams there may be. But those also affect, I think, greatly the question about whether you remarry after a gray divorce or become and cohabit and become a partner. I would particularly point out and urge everyone to take a look at WISER's Quadro booklets, and to make sure that you articulate to those you know or work with that the person receive a qualified divorce retirement order. It is not incorporated in a divorce decree. It is a separate court order that travels with, but is independent of the divorce order. It's extremely important, especially for women in dividing assets. because again, back to the general employment outlook, it is generally a spouse, often a male, who will have a more robust retirement account. This goes back to what I was just talking about just a moment ago, looking at the retirement account funds to see where those are. They're often the largest assets. People often think about a house being the largest asset or real estate, but more importantly, especially over time, and especially in the older ages, I would say the 60 and 70-year-old cohorts, as they're getting divorced, retirement accounts are critical to determining what the financial life will look like. It's important to have as much information as possible about what exactly that retirement benefit is, and certainly we have wonderful guide at Wiser to take a look at what are the issues there. And certainly one of my favorites is the 7 questions you need to ask your divorce attorney to make sure that they actually know what they're doing with Quadros, because often that is just not the case. So some of the things we'll take a look at are looking at the Social Security benefits, saving for an emergency fund, and avoiding some common money mistakes. We've talked a lot already this afternoon about the Social Security benefit that, particularly on pensions as divorce and remarriage or cohabiting is the choice. So these are some of the information that you probably already have available to you. Taking a look at when to claim a Social Security benefit. I cannot say enough times to everybody that I talk to, no matter who it is, please, if you can hang on till 70, please do it, because the numbers will be in your favor and with regard to your Social Security benefit. And remembering, of course, it is a lifetime benefit. And it is and was established early on to be a poverty level benefit. It's not a retirement plan. It is a little bit of that retirement plan. I think sometimes our financial literacy in this country is so low that there is a misunderstanding exactly what Social Security is. And by claiming it early is not a benefit generally, unless you have some specific reason to claim it. Certainly, these are the 3 big times: the minimum benefit at 62, standard benefits at 67, and the maximum benefit at age 70. That increase over time is gigantic, because women live longer than men, but in general, our population, our older population, is living longer because we have improved health access and improved medications to help us live longer with more chronic diseases. So these are some of the factors that I urge you to take a look at when which impact your Social Security benefit, and also to make sure that you are getting the benefit that is best and most advantageous for you. Another thing I'd just like to point out that often people don't know that, that Medicare premiums are taken out of your Social Security benefit. There we go. And again, it depends how long you've worked. This is where the impact on women is felt the greatest, because women often don't have 35 years of qualified work when they claim their benefit, because they've been in and out of the workforce, often taking care of aging parents or raising children, often taking part-time jobs, which will diminish the amount of money that they have put into Social Security over time. Those are all pieces that influence whether or not and what will influence what that benefit actually is. I'd like to just point out there's Wiser did a terrific survey with the National Council on Aging, and it's called What Women Say. I can't urge you enough to take a look at it. At some point, it's quite dense, but it has a lot of really, really good, specifically demographic data. Some of the issues that were presented were issues of caregiving for long-term care, but one of the other another area of focus was, of course, Social Security. And these were some of the policy recommendations that were made, some of which have made their way to the the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee and the Senate Finance Committee as well, to just take a look at to see what the cost would be to implement some of these. One would be to have an actual cost of living adjustment to Social Security benefits, to see if to have them more accurately represent the housing and healthcare costs that people face as they are retired and taking their Social Security benefit. Also to raise the minimum benefit provided in Social Security above the federal poverty level, so that it isn't just a poverty level plan, but something just a bit above that. Again, this is another impact because women, there are many more women, I don't remember the percentage right this moment, than men who are depending 100% on Social Security in their older age. The other thing that has come up several times back to my retirement literacy questions is to provide some sort of programming for middle and older adults so that they would understand how to save for retirement and to make the most of the time, the most that they can from their Social Security benefits. Another recommendation was to provide an increase in Social Security benefits for the lower income individuals over the age of 85. I think because even though we are aging, the cohort over 85 and over is an important one to consider. The fastest growing population demographic in this country of poverty is women over the age of 85, no matter what their demographic looks like. Also, another recommendation was to allow people to continue earning Social Security benefit, even if they're at home, taking care of children, raising children, taking care of older adults or anyone in their family who is seriously ill or disabled, to see if we can continue to have some sort of income stream in later life for those same individuals. The other one that has gotten some very good traction on Capitol Hill, at least at the moment, depending on what happens in Capitol Hill, is to revise again that the 10-year marriage requirement to be eligible for a spouse to take spousal or survival benefits. We talked about that a little bit earlier today, and the recommendation is to move that number from a 10-year marriage to a 7-year marriage in order to provide that benefit. And qualifying for the spousal benefit, I think we've worked through some of that already. But if the spousal benefit is if the spouse is earning through a Social Security benefit more than half of what the other spouse is, there's an opportunity for that second spouse to choose the first spouse's spousal benefit. And under a divorce benefit, this is often a question, especially in gray divorces, to look at what this benefit might be. If the marriage lasted more than 10 years, you're currently single and you can claim the spousal benefit if you've been divorced for 2 years or more. So I always say 2 years and a day, please don't go less than that. And even if the spouse has not claimed the benefit yet, as long as they're 62, that benefit can be claimed. Again, receiving the benefit as a divorced spouse can go both ways. For working women, it may not be the best economic choice, but for those who stayed home or had lesser paying jobs than their spouse, it might be worth it, because the benefit for divorced spouses is 50% of the higher earning spouse and that benefit. And if that otherwise, if you're making more, if your Social Security is greater than that 50%, it might not be worth asking for that additional benefit. It's always worth checking, though. And these are the same things we just discussed about the qualifying for that survivor benefit. You need to be able to. This is I guess the survivor benefit after someone has also died, but you need to understand exactly what that person is claiming and have an understanding of what their Social Security work history was in order to have full discussions with Social Security about it, of course, plus that person's number. You may be eligible for them if you are divorced and the ex-spouse is deceased. you can be remarried if the marriage was after the age of 60. So there are a few little tricks in here that can be applied to looking at developing an income stream for someone who is a spouse in a gray divorce, to make sure that you maximize the Social Security benefit. In maximizing that, that may provide you with additional income that may also affect the decision about whether to remarry or to cohabit. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with my Social Security account. I just think that I stress this in every talk I make to everybody everywhere, because I think our financial literacy is pretty low in this country. And I think it's really important for us to talk to whomever we're talking with and talking about the retirement issues, to understand the value of having an SSA account, my Social Security account. So the second part of this in building your financial life after a gray divorce is to understand that you too will need to have an emergency fund. And I think that that is not solved by wishful thinking, unfortunately. So you have to start taking a look at how much you can save. It doesn't really matter how much, but it has to be something. And one of the things that we always say at Wiser, it doesn't matter when you start. It really doesn't. And don't worry about the fact you're not 25 anymore, or that you're not fully employed. There can be ways you can still eke out some savings to be able to create that emergency account, because we don't know when that might be needed. And it's pretty important to have something sort of stashed away for that moment when you actually need it. So where should the savings go? We always say, number one, an emergency savings account. We find, especially for women, and I think that it's been pretty clear that generally, if you were to ask Americans, do you have enough money for an emergency, I think it's $400 expense? The answer is generally no. So often when people who need cars have a car expense that needs to be paid for, there's no emergency savings and be able to have that car fixed soon enough for that person to resume work, to be able to then create an income stream to save yet again. So emergency savings is critical. We advocate at Wiser to make that emergency savings 6 months of your living expenses if you can do it. I say one day at a time, just keep saving. Pay down whatever debt you have, and also, if you can, continue to put money into retirement savings. And if not exactly retirement savings in the way we generally think about it, either by an employer fund or an employer plan or an IRA of some sort, also continue to save for long-term care. And saving for emergencies is sort of what I was just alluding to, because especially with so many changes that have occurred, some due to increased catastrophic weather events, that often the need for a 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses is pretty critical for people as they're beginning to get back on their feet. And the weather does not discriminate on the basis of age. So it's pretty important to make sure that you can or create or encourage those that you work with to continue that savings program. We always advocate at Wiser to take a look at I-bonds, because they keep pace with inflation, which has been something of note in the last few years. Currently, I-bonds are earning 4.3% through October of this year, and they reset every 6 months. It has proven to be a very important savings device for many moderate and lower income individuals. We encourage, of course, that you pay down debt first, in whatever order you feel best, but credit cards is always the best place to start, along with, car and student loans as well. And, continue to make those mortgage payments as much as you can over time. And that's, again, another expense that has to be figured into to gray divorce, because often in a divorce, there is a split. Often the one spouse will keep the house, and I think in keeping the house, there has to be a really serious discussion about not only the income stream, but the mortgage that may be there and maintenance costs that may result. from ownership of that house. We have all these ideas about how you can save more. Some of it's just having an automatic kind of feature when you have an employer plan, or some kind of ability to just to put money away through your paycheck into a bank account. If not, you can just sort of set something and have some of that cash diverted into an account which will create that savings account. Some common mistakes that undermine Social Security, delegating this. I think this is particularly true and really important to think about in great divorces, because I think there's so much emotional distress associated with the divorce that all centers often around money, especially when people have older children and the children aren't around anymore. So by delegating all of the financial management to a spouse or a partner or even a close friend isn't often the best idea. You need to understand every single penny that you have, because that's what you have for the rest of your life, generally, because your ability to go back to work is limited by your age in part. But even if it isn't specifically, and you do have some kind of job, it won't be at the same level of some other full-time job you may have held. And because one of the other mistakes, I plead guilty to this, is saving less for retirement because you're helping everybody else, paying for children, paying for education, or in my case, I also supported my aging parents, and that was very stark for me when I realized just exactly how much money I was using to help them have their better life. I don't regret it, but it was an economic decision that I think everybody needs to think about long and hard to see whether or not it makes sense for you, and also the person for whom you're taking care of, cashing out your retirement savings when you switch jobs. This is the biggest one I can think of. Please don't buy the boat. I just think that the retirement savings pieces, when you switch jobs, you can roll over often that retirement account into the new one as you change jobs to be able to create a larger stream for earning money for retirement. Please advise those who you work with to continue to look at a way to continue to keep that retirement savings in some form or fashion for a later date when you might need it. And not getting help when you need it. I think that's also a big factor, and also underestimating how long you will live. I think we all, Social Security was built, and so many of the other federal programs were built around the idea that at age, Social Security said 62, people would simply retire and stop working. And I think economically we understand we can't do that anymore. So we have to continue to find some other sources of income, and what will those be? And how will we be able to continue to live, if not the same life we've had before retirement, something similar? I will leave all the longevity illustrators to you. I find this fascinating. We at Weiser have done a lot of work with the actuaries, and I think that I have come to learn and appreciate more and more that life expectancy is something we need to figure out. That also goes into the Social Security claiming, and also into the question of whether you're going to be single or repartnering, or getting remarried after you have eligibility for Social Security. I think the longevity issue is often not fully appreciated. It also comes to play when you're talking about the fact that we all need resources for not only caregiving as people we care about age, but also in taking care of our own longevity. I will leave these to you. I had two parents who lived to nearly 100, so I plan all the time to be 100. I don't think maybe that's not the best thing, but that's kind of where I am. I hope this gave you some information that you haven't had before, maybe take a little bit of a different lens to take a look at some of these issues. I'm fascinated by the work that both of my colleagues have done here today, and look forward to hearing more questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judith. Much appreciated. That was a very detailed, informative presentation. And so I will invite Susan and I-Fen back on, and they are awesome. And we will now move to the Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes or so, and we do have some activity in the Q&A box. Susan, I think you responded to the stat about 1 in 10 people getting a divorce today in the US are age 65 or older. I certainly would not have guessed that. A question I guess I have related to that is, and maybe you mentioned this during the presentation, for those who are getting a divorce who are, I guess, Social Security retirement benefit eligible, do you know how many people maybe have already start taking their benefit? I know that's a somewhat related question, but it's just something that came to mind. I don't know if you all came across that at
Yeah.
all in your data.
When we did our study looking at economic well-being and poverty among older adults who are age eligible for divorce, or for Social Security, excuse me. So for this cohort, it was you had to be 63 or older. Over 90% of gray divorced adults were taking Social Security benefits in the study. I mean, it was probably in the mid 90s, right, I-Fen? That's my recollection. So nearly everyone who is
Wow.
age eligible is taking it. Very few people wait until age 70, as Judith described. I think that's definitely the atypical experience, but that would be true across marital statuses. That's not unique to the gray divorce group.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I guess that makes sense, but also has, I think, some bigger implications for this group in particular. So the next question, which you replied to in the Q&A as well, but maybe you want to say a little bit more about it, was do you have any information about the impact of children from prior marriages and how that maybe impacts repartnering, including decisions related to whether to consolidate assets or keep them separate?
Yeah, we think that, I mean, that's a great question, and we think it's really an important one. We do know that adult children are likely to try to shape the trajectories of their parents' romantic lives after gray divorce, and are not too sanguine about remarriage for the most part, because it does mean, from a legal standpoint, that you're going to be commingling your assets and your debts. And you know, but at the same time, using the HRS data, at least we don't have the specific measures that I think the individual in the question is describing, such as, you know, are adult children advising their parents to try to contain their assets for themselves, or, you know, have a prenup, for example, that sort of thing. We unfortunately don't have that level of detail in the HRS, but I agree that it's very likely that those sorts of conversations are going on behind the scenes, and probably adult children are part of the reason why we're seeing an uptick in cohabitation later in life, is because they recognize that remarriage might be less advantageous for their parents on balance.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. As you were talking and I was thinking about assets, one of the things that came to mind was if whether or not a spousal IRA impacts any of the statistics in any way, if people behave one way or another based on that, if they have one or not, just because of mental accounting and how we manage our money. But maybe that's neither here nor there, just something that popped to mind. And it wasn't a question from one of our attendees, so I'm going to hop over to their questions as opposed to continuing with my own. All right, so there was a question about, do these data points also include the tribal population by chance? And I think maybe that's for I-Fen or Susan, but obviously, Judith, if you have any thoughts about that particular question and how that intersects with your work, we can ask you that as well. So we'll start with Susan and I-Fen, and then if Judith, if you have something.
Let me defer to I-Fen on this. What would you say about HRS coverage?
I don't think we have information about tribal population, at least not in the public data set information that we can get publicly.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I would be curious to know, we might be able to do something with the census data to look at divorce rates, gray divorce rates for tribal populations. And that's not something that we've attempted thus far, but I think that's a great question. And I'm curious now to see if we could pull that level of specificity through the census data probably. So thank you for that. We'll look into that one.
I work a lot with tribal tribes, Alaska Natives, and Hawaiian elders in the work that I do in my elder justice work. And we don't have much that pulls up in this particular area, but we've been doing a lot more work in financial literacy and getting more questions on that. I do know there's a tribal in the study that I mentioned, What Women Say. There is a tribal cohort in there, which will give you not the information you're looking for here, but it may be of interest enough to get some information for you.
All right, thanks. Let's move on to a few others. There's just, I guess I would say, a general question about what advice you might give to someone who is still working. Let's say they're Social Security age eligible for retirement benefits. So they're drawing retirement and has only very minimal retirement savings. What would you advise them to think about, considering it's tough to live on Social Security retirement alone?
I don't
Any
know that
thoughts there?
there's not a good answer to that. Unfortunately, I wish that there was. I think, we're talking lots of big policy stuff, but I think the practicalities are, if able, to find some sort of part-time work. I mean, I think that unfortunately, the way our system in this country is set up, the cushion is not very soft. And there isn't, and what would have been, traditionally thought of as a safety net isn't really there any longer, because there are so few defined benefit plans that are available to people as they're retiring. Not everybody understood or participated in putting money into IRAs or 401ks if they were available. And I think if you have very, very limited retirement along with very limited Social Security, you have to look at every conceivable other benefit that may be available to you. Food and medicine are the two big areas where those are available. If this person is an older person and might qualify for some of those benefits, the National Council on Aging has a whole series of centers across the country where you can do what they call a benefits checkup to see what other programs may be available to supplement that income.
Yeah, it's a tough question and not a whole lot of
Terrible.
great answers,
No.
sadly. And tough situations sometimes require tough considerations, such as what you've mentioned, and also other things, thinking about your location and what the taxation of certain benefits are and things like that. And is it worth
Right.
moving somewhere else? None of it's easy,
No.
but definitely things to consider. Okay, so let's see. Well, here's a tough one, maybe. What are the usual reasons for gray divorce? So just broadening that out. I
Oh,
don't know if you all have found any consistencies or trends in that.
well, go ahead, Susan.
Yep. Well, we've done some work on this, and we were expecting that things like various midlife transitions, such as retirement or declining health or an empty nest, might be predictive. But really, despite our best efforts, we didn't find too much evidence for that. I mean, there's some work suggesting that health declines on the part of the wife can lead to divorce, suggesting that men are a bit skittish about being caregivers. But really, it seems like a lot of the correlates of gray divorce are similar to those for divorce more broadly. So levels of economic security, the length of time you've been married, the longer you're married, the less likely you are to divorce. Being in a first marriage as opposed to a remarriage is protective. And that's a key factor why we've seen an increase in gray divorce, is that this baby boom generation was the one that experienced the divorce revolution of the 1970s. Many of them remarried. And remarriages are about 2.5 times more likely to end in a gray divorce as first marriages are. But we also know from some qualitative in-depth interview research that unlike younger couples for whom there's often a precipitating event such as infidelity, for older couples, many times it seems to be that they've simply drifted apart over the years and they just have less in common. And as Judith indicated, as we live longer, I think that the calculus has changed. Marriage is less compulsory nowadays, and there are viable alternatives, including cohabitation or living alone and being single, right? And so that's why, you know, you reach 65, you've retired, you've raised your kids, maybe you don't have as much in common with your spouse anymore, but you're going to live on average 20 more years, which is a long time to spend with someone you may not be that into anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we could go on and on about this. We are at about 1, but I do want to close on one thing. I want to give Judith maybe you one more opportunity to comment on a question, which there's a question from Terry, which is about being Social Security eligible now or in the future and remarrying. And if your spouse has poor health, could you possibly use your assets to cover their healthcare costs? So maybe you want to comment on that to close us out here today. Any thoughts you may have about asset loss or protection based on any of these factors?
I don't know that you would, could establish anything. It's if you are using, let's say you're married and you have separate assets and you want to use your assets for the health and welfare of your spouse you're now taking care of, that's your generosity. It's not going to, there's not much you can do with that. You can claim probably something in some tax code. But I don't think other than that, and I don't know of any way that you can use Social Security later to be of assistance in any kind of long-term care situation. I mean, that's an interesting question to me because it really woke something up in my brain, because we use Social Security benefits for children who are under a certain age to be able to make education payments. It seems that would be a wonderful revolution at Social Security if we could figure out a way at the other end of life to also provide, maybe it's an enhanced benefit, not hugely, but some enhancement in that benefit to be able to use or take some sort of, tax credit, whatever you want to do, call it, for the care of an older adult for all the reasons that we care. Yeah. So I like it woke up something in my brain, but I have no good answers.
Yeah, sometimes those are the best questions. The ones we don't have answers to yet, because then we can get to work on it. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending today, especially our presenters and all their great work sharing with us today. As a reminder, this webinar and the slides will be posted on the RDRC website within a few business days. And I am greatly appreciative of the comments, the questions from the audience, and everybody who came to spend time with us today. So thanks again, and I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Oops. There we go. Exit. Yeah.